Presentation on riding the LLM wave with regional language understanding. Large language models have the potential to lift productivity and efficiency, but the positive effects from LLM-powered applications in different parts of the world are affected by the LLM's ability to operate in different regional contexts. Join us to learn more about AI Singapore's research into LLMs and how the trajectory of model development can take into account the intricacies of regional language understanding. Before I welcome the speaker up on stage, do note that this session cannot be recorded, so do not record any parts of the presentation, slides, okay? Because the information is confidential. So strictly no filming or recording, even professionally, during this segment. All right, let's head into the presentation and put our hands together and welcome our speaker. Let's showcase the speaker's screen. Dr. Leslie Teo. All right, who will be speaking up. He's the Senior Director of AI Products of AI Singapore. Let's put our hands together and welcome him.
Thank you and good afternoon. Just a bit of reminder about the videography and photography. It's not that this is any secret, it's just that it's essentially embargoed. We're going to be talking more about this later in the month. I'm just giving you an early preview. First thing to note is we're going to build on what the panel before talked about in terms of one aspect, which is representation, right? So we observe, right? Let's see, at least most of us, that this new technology in AI, foundation models, large language models, is something different and discontinuous, and potentially the beginning of, the Holy Grail, which is in our field, AGI. But we also observe, as stated earlier, that most of the public data, in fact, maybe a lot of the private data too, is dominated by the Western world, right? Nothing wrong with it, it's just a statement of fact. Right? And if training data does matter, then it does have an impact on the model. And one way to observe this is to see how, this is a paper which looked at the correlation between cultures and the correlation with so-called ChatGPT answers, right? So on the x-axis, you have, by looking at surveys, values relative to, in this case, the US, right? And on the right, on the y-axis, it's correlation with ChatGPT, and you see a strong relationship, right? Essentially, ChatGPT is, as you might expect, coming out of Silicon Valley, West Coast, US. Those are the values it represents, right? And for much of our region, actually, it's a different, again, nothing wrong. This is just the way it is. A different set of cultural values. So this is, in a way, the prime motivator of what we wanted to do. And it's not a question about who's better or not better. It's a question of representation. Right? So we set out to do three things. One is build a set of smaller, small, medium. And here it's actually determined by data, right? Because if we don't have data, even if you want to have a big model, you will be under training. Right? But we set out to build a family of models that can better represent our region. In doing so, we will have artifacts, right? What are the artifacts or the enablers? We need the data. We need evaluation metrics, right? All of which we hope will then do number 2, which makes it easier for the community in our region to do their own pre-training and fine-tuning, right? No need to redo things again. And third, because these models are open, right? They're small, hopefully they are accessible. So we want to address this issue of, you don't need to have a huge node on AWS, nothing wrong with AWS, huge node on AWS, thousands of dollars. I can do this in my own little, let's say, with my own computer, right? That's what we set out to do. And here today, I'm here to share a little bit about some of our challenges and give you a preview of some of the results. But first, I want to acknowledge a few things. One is I'm just a spokesperson. Actually, many of my teams are here. And from my perspective, I'm very proud to work with this team because we are the team in Singapore that is pre-training from scratch. As far as we know, in Singapore, we are the first team that going to be able to do this, right? And we are able to do this because of funding from the National Research Foundation. So that's the other acknowledgement, right? And actually, later on, you will see the other part of what we are, why we are sharing this, is because we are doing this in the open. We need your help, right? I think Ming Tan earlier talked about collaboration. Really, we do need collaboration. This is not our model. It's not a Singapore model. What we are trying to do is build a representation for Southeast Asia, right? And yes, Indonesian, Vietnamese, Thai, they are actually almost obvious things. But actually, we do care about the even more low-resource languages, right? Even more where data doesn't exist. So we actually want to share this with you because we hope we can build a community, right? And then we better represent our region. And it would be great. I mean, to me, it would be the best compliment, and we kind of accomplish our mission if the Googles and the OpenAIs of the world will say, actually, your data is useful. We will use this in-house model, right? We will incorporate it, because then we can all benefit. Right? But anyway, that's enough propaganda. Let's talk about the model. What is the big challenge in our effort? The first challenge is data. Right? It's not, again, as I said, if you went to the public internet and you download the data, you will find very little representation of Southeast Asia, right? Language is one, but just knowledge about Southeast Asia or things about Southeast, not so much. But it's worse than that, right? Unfortunately, due to the nature of the internet or commerce or capitalism, if one wants to be very philosophical, much of the internet is junk, right? Advertising. For sure, you will see advertising for like Viagra, right? That's like almost a given. You will see all the SEO words, right? Everyone trying to get attention, right? And it's bad in English. It's even worse in non-English. Again, if you think about it from a commercial point of view, it sort of makes sense, right? In English, we have the open source community. We have so many wonderful things. We all do it in English, right? If I want to share an idea, I do it in English. If I'm doing it in Bahasa, yes, some of it happened, but there's a lot of commercial reasons to write in Bahasa, right? So things are dominated by low quality, less quality in a sense, meaning higher advertising or things that are geared towards a commercial or propaganda kind of purpose. So we have to think about the quality of the data and the quantity of the data. And I might note that if we are succeeding in our goal here and making LLMs more representative of our region, a key reason will be we have curated data that is higher quality and better representative of our region, right? Does it better. So what do we have to do, right? We have to clean the data, obviously. In the short term, actually, this is a focus of, this is what we did for this version of the models. But we also have a long-term strategy, right? Because we notice even in the data that's quote-unquote cleaned, it's actually not that clean, not that representative. But it takes time, right? Because essentially you're taking snapshots of the internet every month, and you're cleaning it up, and then you're refining it, and so on and so forth. And the third strategy that's also take time is collaboration, right? So we hope that as we show the value of this activity, more and more people will say, actually, we have good quality data. There's nothing sensitive here. We're willing to share it, right? And we have already the beginnings of that. Data is number one, right? And just to give you a snapshot, in our current set of models, it's about 1 trillion tokens, right? Which is an improvement from where we were a year ago, but not at the frontier, right? People are doing, yesterday I think there was a Chinese model that had 3.5 trillion tokens, right? But 1 trillion tokens focused as best as we can, as much as we can on, try to put as much Southeast Asian data as possible. It's not a lot, but it's almost 10 times, depending on, whether you say Llama 2 or, some of the models that we do know where the data come from, right? Or Llama 2 or Llama 1 or, and so on. The open source ones where data is a bit more transparent. Now, data is one. A smaller issue or challenge or question is how do you kind of tokenize, right? And here we decided to not stick to convention and follow Llama 2 or follow usual, partly because these are all based on English, right? They're trying to solve a largely English problem. So we used or created created is not. We came up with our own tokenizer, taking into account experiments about how when you use the tokenizer, how certain metrics that you look at, like fertility or continuity, how it looks like. That's one. Second is theoretical, BPE, a lot of reason to use it. And then finally, since we are not just computational AI people, but linguists, looking at the results, right? So we have a really large tokenizer to be vocabulary, right? Essentially 256K. And actually a matter of contention between the team and me, or discussion, is it too much? Are we overdoing it? But I think the properties that we see in the model is because of our tokenizer. Right? Just by comparison, 52K or even less might be more what you would see in other open source models. Lastly, the training infrastructure, right? We had a lot of help from our friends in AWS to help us do this, because again, I don't think, at least, from a global perspective, groups in China or groups in the US, this is like, they can do it in their sleep, right? But from a Singapore perspective, there are not many experts here. Having to have such a huge concentration, even though it's not a lot, it's huge by our standard, because we've never done it at this before. We needed a lot of help. So no big, at the frontier here, but 256K GPUs, trying to make sure it all works, and a lot of help from our partners, right? So again, just to now talk a little bit about what we see. Want to tell you a bit about the model. So train again on a lot of more Southeast Asian data. So far, sizes 3 billion, 7 billion, 13 billion. We haven't finished the 13 billion. And our intent is that this is permissively licensed, right? I'll give you 4 examples. But before I do it, and as I show you the examples of how it performs, I want to put this in context, right? Why do we compare to GPT-4, right? It's not that we think there's anything wrong with GPT-4. To me, GPT-4 or Claude 2, Claude 2 is not really multilingual, but Claude 2 is a nice model. Palm 2, these are all wonderful models. GPT-4 in our testing seems to be the best for our region, right? It beats even Palm, right? Palm 2. Is Rachel still here? No, I don't see her. But at least in our testing, GPT-4 really is very fluent in Bahasa. It does really well in Bahasa. So to us, GPT-4 here is kind of setting the gold standard, right? And then Mistral and Llama 2, they are, in our view, the best open source models right now, right? And so we wanted to see how it works, right? And then our model. So let me share with you how it works. It does in a few examples. One is just simple, right? I ask you how you are in Bahasa. We instruct unit in Bahasa as a first test, even though it's actually trained on 11 as Southeast Asian languages. So if I say apa kabar, which is how are you in Bahasa, it says, oh no, it says selamat pagi. Sorry, I say apa kabar, it says selamat pagi, right? Good morning. A normal response, right? What we notice, by the way, I want to emphasize, Mistral and Llama 2 are really good models. If I have an English problem, I'm using Llama or Mistral, right? Or GPT. I'm not using our model because our model is trained for the region. We had to make some compromises, right? We are not trying to beat Llama 2 or Mistral in the intelligence sense, in that sense. But when it comes to the region, so I say apa kabar, and we frequently notice this, these good models like Mistral or Llama 2, because they're not really multimodal. They hallucinate badly. They don't understand. They don't answer in the right language, right? So here you see Mistral really going very creative. So does Llama 2. GPT-4 actually is good, right? Because again, gold standard, right? So it's even better in some sense, depending on what your purpose is, than our model, right? It says selamat pagi, which is good morning, but then it also says how are you, right? A response. Next task, right? Because remember, if you're talking about representation, we're not talking translation, right? Per se. We're talking about, does an LLM, if you believe in the propaganda, have a good representation of the world, right? And in this case, the world that matters to us, Southeast Asia. So, one thing to ask about that is not just understanding, right, of language, but do you know where a place is, right? So I want to go shopping in Jakarta. Say, rekomendasi tempat belanja di Jakarta, right? To me. And our model, not bad, right? It gives you a few places. Right? I think Indonesians here would say it's not bad. We do get, again, evidence of hallucination with the two, Mistral or Llama 2. And GPT-4 does, again, not bad solution, includes actually some of our responses, but nicely formatted, and in number 1 to 10, right? Next example, right? Can it tell me whether you're angry or not, right? Does it understand? If I give you a bunch of text, or if maybe this is a transcription of a conversation, can it tell me? So it's an NLU task, very common, right? Straightforward, simple answer from our model. Not bad for Mistral. Mistral got it, right? And Llama 2 kind of hallucinates, right? It sort of says it misunderstood the question. And GPT-4 says it's positive, but gives you a lot more information, right? Last example. We fine-tune for now, given time, into Bahasa. So that's why the first 3-4 examples are Bahasa. But we also wanted to test because the base model actually is trained on Southeast Asia, right? Can it understand beyond just Bahasa, right? And here we tried something even more tricky. We ask a question in Thai, we want the answer in Indonesian. So Thai I don't know Thai. So I don't know how to read it, but it's, which city is the largest population in Indonesia, but answer in Indonesian. Right? That's the English version of what we asked. And here is, our model. It says Jakarta. Mistral kind of, it's sort of there. But it's not answering in Indonesian, right? Llama kind of went off and mixed Japanese and Thai, and also not answering in Indonesian. GPT-4 does pretty well, right? You will notice actually GPT-4 is, especially these days, a lot more verbose, because every time you get the token, you're paying for it. No, but it seems to be a property that we do see, not knowing when to stop, right? It's useful information sometimes it hallucinates, but stopping is a bit more of a challenge. But certainly, again, I want to emphasize we are not trying to say we're better than GPT-4, right? And our model is much, much smaller, and it's not our intent, actually. So that's just a teaser, if you like, some examples of the model. I want to say that, again, this is the important part, if you like, of why we are sharing, that we are working with partners. We think this is open source in the best possible meaning of the word. We already have partners, we welcome new partners, right? So we have academic partners, we have government-related agency partners that's certainly doing a lot of the fundamental work, like on data and metrics. And then partners in the corporate side, right? Doing the use cases, right? Customer service, e-commerce, obvious, legal, IT services. These are different sorts of partners we have. So here, I guess, sharing it with you to say, happy to work with you. We are infrastructure builders. We believe this is a set of infrastructure that can empower AI across the region. We hope that we can do the heavy lifting, build a community, build a platform, and you guys go and monetize it and make an impact. Right? There's a lot to do, and we will also be releasing a lot more about the model, and that's our email right here. If you want to learn more, be kept up to date, and join us. So with that, let me now do the Q&A part, and I will be joined with William, who is a key team member. We will be happy to answer your questions.
Right, to the audience, here's the QR code to join Slido. You may ask some of the questions here. So do scan the QR code to ask your questions. So it's time for the Q&A segment, and there are already some questions in which I'll leave it to the team to get this going.
Yeah, so I think there's a question here, maybe the one that we will do is more technical, which is, what is your strategy for finding the optimal size of training data sets for specific language? Actually, maybe the way I would say is like right now we know we don't have enough. We haven't hit the constraint yet. So
Yeah, we don't need to think too much.
Yes.
There's just not enough out there, so we just get as much as possible.
Yeah.
The only thing is that we just need to make sure that the quality is there, right?
Yeah.
So actually, if we don't care about quality, the data will be bigger, but it won't help, right? Having a lot of bad quality data. So the strategy right now is to get as much high quality as possible.
So the key point that we will both say is that we're so far from the optimal that we're not even thinking about the optimal. And the second point we will make is that when we look at the data, there are two constraints that actually make it even worse. One is, as I said, right, there's a lot of junk on the internet. And the question is, yes, you want to include some of that, but how, you don't want to include all of it. And so for example, advertising, but good advertising, bad advertising. The other thing is that, at least for us, since we want to be transparent about the data and we want to open source the data, we want to make it easy for the community to use the data, our data has to be defensible, as in no copyright issues, we didn't steal this from somebody, it should not have PII. These are all basic things. And this actually does constrain us, because I think my team, in looking at the data, for example, we found, sometimes people claim things to be open source and freely usable, but then, in the actual information, it says, please do not reproduce, right? It's copyrighted, and then it's a bit tricky, right?
Yeah, and I think the approach that we are taking is very conservative, right?
When it comes to this.
Yeah,
yes.
when it comes to this, right? Because our intent is to be responsible and to open the data, right?
Yes. So that's the data question. Yes. So I think a good question is, GPT performs well. Why do we still need our own? It's a good question, right? So I would say many use cases, probably not. But there are two reasons, right? I don't want to talk about a third reason. I mentioned it. But the first reason is you use GPT-4, you're paying, and your latency, right? So one is paying, okay, and yes, you are at risk so much, because actually you even notice in the OpenAI APIs, they increase sometimes 10 times, right? So suddenly, you might think you have a business model, and if it's very low cost, but it increased 10 times, right? And you never know. So quite a few businesses actually say, this is a risk I don't want to take. But a more practical thing is that if you use GPT-4 as a developer, you've also seen it, you've seen latencies, right, that are not acceptable. Right? And you'd rather have sometimes a smaller model that is more responsive, because we all know, and we all know here especially, that the precise, if a model is 95% accurate, but it takes 2 minutes, you've lost your customer. Right? So that's the second, I would say I put that under reason number one. The second reason is that many businesses say to us, we want to fine-tune the model and we want control over it. Right? You can't do it with GPT-4.
Fine-tuning, value alignment is even more important.
Yes. And then actually that I guess is the sort of third point, which is, remember, if I ask, I gave you some tasks in GPT-4 that were more language related. If we were to ask value-related questions, right, GPT-4 will give very different answers. Right? So for example, last year, this is 3.5, I will, as a test, I just said, write some Christmas greetings, right? And GPT could not and did not understand the difference in Malay or in Bahasa. I understand Malay, but this problem arises in Bahasa Indonesia and Bahasa Melayu, which is the word of for God. There are two words, right? One of which ends you up in prison if you use it in the wrong place. GPT-4 does not know that. GPT-4 does not know that if you are a Hindu, you cannot marry a Muslim in many parts of Southeast Asia, right? And so the last thing you want is, if you ask it a question, I'm going to get married, my wife is Muslim and I'm Hindu, the first thing to say is not congratulations, but to say, maybe you should know this is the case. It does not, right? So nothing wrong, right? This is the nature of things. The question is, do we want alternatives, right? And I want to emphasize again, maybe for 70% of the use case, Llama 2, Mistral, GPT-4, they are perfect, right? Or 80% of the use case. It's only in a subset, and the question is, do we want to create that possibility?
And by the way, the examples that Leslie gave, it was all in Bahasa. So I think, which is probably the highest resource languages among Southeast Asia languages, right? The more you go into the other spectrum, right? Khmer, Burmese, Tamil, the performance will be not as good for GPT-4.
So that's that question. Future business model. Maybe I should explain again. We are representing. We are funded from the research side of Singapore. AI Singapore is. We are meant to be catalyzing the ecosystem. So actually, it's our job, if you like, to find those things that are missing. If you think of public infrastructure. And in this case, it's AI infrastructure, and you put it in place, and suddenly you get a whole ecosystem. That's our job, right? And in our space, we have great examples of this, right? PyTorch, TensorFlow, right? It's a different kind of, slightly different, but that's the idea, right? These tools enable greater value creation. And our hope is the greater value creation is happening here in Singapore. But there's another important thing that we're doing that relates back to something discussed even from the morning, right? Which is that we are building up capabilities in Singapore. That's a very important task that we're doing, right? And we hope that we center and we build a group of people, Singaporeans, and people who want to be Singaporeans and from the region, who will be friends of Singapore, we give them this opportunity, right? Because, and put it differently, actually, if we didn't do this, it's very hard to get 200 or maybe now 500 or 1,000 GPUs to do training. How many Singaporeans get that opportunity?
We can take the next one, right?
Yeah.
How can you contribute? Well, the easiest is help us build
sign
some
up.
sign up, data, use case, validation. I think
criticize. Yes.
Yeah, give feedback. Next year, we're probably going to be interested also in doing a little bit of the value alignment. I think we need a lot of help there because it cannot be coming from AI Singapore only. What value are we representing, right? So we definitely need partnerships there.
Yeah, so at least our roadmap, if things, if we get a good reception once we officially put this out, roadmap calls for, at least we want to hit size, 50 billion, 60 billion, where the emergent properties become more very clear, right? And then do more value alignment, right? So all these things are ways that we can help. And to be honest, Bahasa and Vietnamese are actually among in our region, probably already very well resourced to some extent. So the real gaps are, in the other languages. So that's even more if we can find ways of patching that would be great. Yep. Okay, I guess there's a comment that this is meaningfully impactful. Well, I hope so. And please get involved.
Single model versus two separate ones.
Yeah, actually, it's a good question. And maybe William and I will debate this, right? So one reason, so I'll give you one thought, right? So the problem here that we face, I think, is data. Right? And the benefit of having Southeast Asia as a region, and by the way, we don't just train this model on the region, we include English and Chinese and code, right? So it's not just not just the region. And the reason why we do it, many reasons, but it's transfer learning, right? So our hope is that, it's not exactly the same family, but maybe there's something else going on with historical relationships and so on. Family of linguistically, I mean, but we're all connected, and by history and region, there is benefit from transfer learning, and therefore, and data is a constraint, and therefore, even if I think a pure Bahasa model might be better, actually, if I do it in pure Bahasa, I don't have enough data, and I don't benefit from transfer learning. So that's the reason why we are going down this path. But there's nothing to prevent anyone from trying a completely monolingual kind of approach, right? Yeah, so maybe you can give the other.
No, I mean, you're right? And to be honest, this is an experiment that we need to do as well, right? There are 4 major language families in Southeast Asia. Would it be better if we built one model for each family, and therefore, because by virtue that all the languages within that family, they're related, there can be some positive transfer? I think that's something we need to explore, right? It's a good question. Maybe I should read the question because it's not,
okay. Sorry, we're not very good at this. So we did the single model. How do you think LLM will empower Asia and make it more competitive on a global stage? Actually, first thing I would at least for me, I would say that what we are trying to do is an old strategy. This is a purely Singapore perspective. An old strategy. Singapore is a hub, right? We are building a tool that will make us relevant for the region and the hub, right? Hopefully, this anchors talent from the region, but then U.S. companies, Chinese companies also come here, to come. So that's one. But but that's traditional, conventional view. The second thing for me, though, is that with this tool, what we really hope is that LLMs are accessible, right? Meaning that across the region, people can use it, right? And those of us who believe that AI is a powerful enabler, we don't want it to just be a tool that English speakers can use. Right, so we want to make it more accessible, more representative, less scary, right? Maybe my expression of that is I ask myself this question. There's no doubt in my mind, right? Lawrence earlier said no one should learn Python coding, right? For really needs to learn Python. My view is that in a few years' time, we will hit a point where we don't have Python anymore. We don't have code. We don't have intermediary code, right? The machine will go like some of us learn in the old days, machine language, right? Assembly code, right? And you just tell it what you want, right? You just say, I want this, and it's maybe going to code that way, right? Directly into a language a machine can understand. The key question is, are all the developers going to speak in English, or are they going to speak in their own native languages? And the possibility we would like to create is that you can talk to it, you can interact with it in your own native language and your own native environment, right? So if I'm in Jakarta, or let's say I'm in Medan, or I'm in Bandung, and I say, hey, I want, first of all, I talk to it in Bahasa, but second, if I say I'm going to the marketplace, it actually knows what I mean. That I didn't mean I'm going to the mall, right? I do know what you're talking about, right? So that's the second part, right? So there's this economic hub argument, but I think there's also this accessibility argument, right? That I think is hopefully an important thing. And by the way, in Singapore, we also have this challenge, right? Because to be honest, because I have an economist's background, I sometimes feel everything in English is more efficient, right? Why bother, just learn English and solve all problems, right? That might be a very narrow view because, again, we're thinking language. It's not always language, right? It's mindset. It's how you think about it from a cultural point of view. But I guess I would say that even in Singapore, we have communities that don't speak English that well, right? And they can suffer for it, right? So if I don't speak English so well, I want to go to the small claims court, right? It's not easy for me, right? Everything is in English. So if we have a tool that can take my broken Chinese, English, Malay, Tamil, and make it into a bit better, right? We make justice more equal. So even in Singapore, we have these challenges, right? And so it's, I think the hub argument is important, economic argument, but the accessibility argument is also there.
I think I'll probably add one from a research angle as well. And in case you don't know, that Southeast Asia is actually the home of one of the most, we have the most diverse languages in the world, I think. If you count the dialects, right? I think Indonesia alone has, 700 plus dialects, right? So if you really want to do a multilingual kind of research, right, this is the best place to do so. And we hope we can contribute to some insights there.
Can this model understand and process mixed languages spoken intelligibly? Yes, that's what we hope it can do, right? It can do mixed messages, mixed context.
We observe that behavior right now, even though you didn't see it in the examples.
Yeah. What is the total funding required to develop this model? I guess
I'll let Leslie answer this one.
Quite a bit, but quite a lot less than OpenAI. Yeah, we do need NRF support to be able to do this. How many languages does a CLLM support now? So in theory, 11. What are the challenges to add more? Actually, it's a data issue, right? With a caveat, which is that we are also running this experiment, which is to say that if we do this 11, which includes English and Chinese, we get these properties. If we start to add more, the question becomes, do we lose anything, right? Does the model get confused, right? Because we have, like Bloom, multilingual, 100 languages, on the other extreme, right? And Bloom, actually no one talks about Bloom anymore, partly because it's really maybe it didn't work so well.
There is this thing called the curse of multilinguality, right? So the higher the number of languages you support, individual capacity for individual language reduce.
Yeah. So how is it applied in e-commerce? I mean, to be honest, we are building a lot of the infrastructure. We haven't seen the full creativity, I think, that can come from having this. But you see the beginnings of it, right? So people have been using not just this model, but many models to do marketing, right? Especially you want to do a bit more personalized, and then you can't have your copywriters write too many versions, but you can have some of these models do that, right? So marketing is almost. I'm not sure if personally, I think we have enough ads, but marketing materials is an obvious thing. We have a lot of interest in customer service related stuff, and here it's not necessarily replacing customer service, right? Professionals, but augmenting them. Because one of the challenges with customer service is high turnover, right? It's a very frustrating kind of job. People turn over. You have to train your staff. If you have a companion that can help you, that can guide you, that can create some institutional knowledge, that might be helpful. People also trying to do use cases where they're trying to, have as a conversation is going on with a human, some of these models kind of give you alerts or prompts. These are all related to customer service and e-commerce. What else in e-commerce? I would say the more interesting ones we've seen are things like fraud detection. Right? Earlier, you might have heard generating photos to sell my product, right? You might imagine there are a lot of people who generate fake photos or fake postings, and people like Lazada or GoTo have to figure out how to take this down, right? Otherwise, it's a scam. So that's another kind of use case.
I think there's a rise of interest in conversational search kind of use cases. Instead, because you can express your intents better if you can have like a follow-up queries to your original ones, right? It can describe a little bit better what you want, right? We see a little bit of that. A lot of them right now in English. I would imagine it will be quite difficult if you say you want to buy some traditional costume in some parts of Southeast Asia. Explaining it in English a little bit hard, right? So you probably this is where hopefully we will see this model being applied to.
Yeah, and it's not really our work per se, because remember we are thinking we want to fill the gap that comes from, if you like, the textual representation of the world. Later on, if we could, we want to add audio and then visual, right? But I would say directly right now, already people like Google and Bing are trying to deal the multimodal with visual, right? So visual search, right? So it's, I mean, I don't shop this way, but I don't like my kids to use TikTok, but I can imagine, TikTok, big thing, right? Buy, visual, point. These are all going to be ways that people interact, right? And maybe visual will be less, actually, you can imagine visual might have less regional issues, right? Words more problematic, but visual is just a visual representation, right? So people use languages which are associated to this region's culture. Describe diversity, nationality, team. You want to know who we are? I guess we have Singaporeans, we have Indonesians, we have
Vietnamese,
Filipino. We have
somebody who is.
We have Singaporeans from all races.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And we have PRs, and we have.
And we are hiring.
Yeah.
People from other parts of Southeast Asia.
Yes. And I will say it's important, right? So I think one of the things that I am proud of is we have linguists and we have people from diversified backgrounds. Because again, we are talking about building something to represent. So we want to make sure we don't end up with just one mindset.
I also would like to emphasize here is that it's not just our team, right? This is one of the importance of being very, very open and basically collaborative with the region. So we have partners in almost all Southeast Asia countries right now helping us in this effort.
Yeah, and one of our team members who's sitting there speaks like all the region's languages, so I guess we can count him 11 times.
Yes.
Will the effort be limited to, for now it's text, but there definitely is a proposal and a desire to extend it, not necessarily by us, but with partners, right? And I think it's natural. Multimodality is just expected, right? What are the languages that you will cover over time beside Bahasa? Oh yeah, okay, so just to be explicit, right? We already pre-trained the model, as I said, we try to pre-train it with as much data as we have, so it's Bahasa, English, right? But the languages are the five original ASEAN countries, Bahasa, Thai, Vietnamese, Tagalog, but we also have Khmer, Burmese, Laotian, and Tamil. Right? Will AI Singapore, will model be trained to handle mathematical logic and reasoning? My answer to that actually is, again, remember the experiment. If you like, what we are trying to fill the gap in is about representation of the region and the stuff. So I tend to think that we don't want to reinvent the wheel if there are models out there that already represent, logic, and we should build on top of it, right? So Mistral is quite good, and efforts like that quite good. What we want to do is say, okay, there's a gap here. How can we fill that gap? So put it differently, if I were to take this analogy way too far, but it kind of is how we, how it's coming out when we practically do things. It's like you go and do a degree, right? I would say go and do a degree in the best school possible, go to Harvard, whatever. And what we want to do is just give you a cultural immersion program once you finish your degree. We're not trying to replace the best, the best that can be possible. So that's kind of why. On the other hand, there is a bit of a trade-off here, because if our model cannot understand basic things, it actually can't be useful either. So there's a sort of trade-off there. To train a model, need to run many computing power. How many enough for training? So for this year, I would say at peak we were using 256 A100s, right? But this is not enough when we go to 50B, right? We will need over 1,000. That's roughly where things are. Yes, there are techniques, it's getting better, and so on, but to be really doing this and not, because if you don't have enough GPUs, you take a long time to not have a 6 months kind of waiting around, training. You do need to have at least 1,000, GPUs. And there's a very question that I want to answer. Will AI Singapore develop its own model against the flow of populist model towards direction of AGI? Decoder transformer may not be the answer. I'm not exactly sure what the intent of this question is. I guess I don't think we are wedded to the transformer architecture, right? We're also not wedded to this way of doing things, which is training from we are entirely open to maybe fine-tuning could work also, right? So we are also running experiments actually, but it's not so simple, right? Because for example, Llama 2, the tokenizer is different. It's not so simple, but we are not wedded to this architecture. In the sense of transformer, we're not wedded as in one monolithic. We might try a mixture of experts, right? And people say, there are efficiencies there, although training is not so easy. So none of this are wedded. I think for us, we will be pragmatic. And this is why I started off by saying the most important thing I think we do is the data. Because I can guarantee you the model will change, the architecture will change. But the data is important. And actually, there's something else about the data that is a bit unique, right? Because up until last year, most of the data was generated by human. Now we're in an era where I don't know what's human and I don't know what's machine anymore. Right? So we do have a bit of a constraint in some sense, but I guess if a better architecture comes along, we will use the data and train hopefully a better model.
And representing the team here, Leslie, is that I can share personally, and representing the team here that doing pre-training is a painful process. Yes, quite a lot of effort needed, yes. Sleepless nights as well. So if you tell me there's a better way to do this, we're definitely open.
We would. It took our team 22 days to do the 7 billion and 24 hours a day. Right? People are on shifts. When is the model ready for release? Very soon. So keep up. Sign up. You will get the update. Have you considered working with a little? Actually, we want to. We are. We have open communication. Okay. What is the model architecture used? I guess how large is the model? Right now, our largest is 7B. The architecture is we used Mosaic Composer from their Foundry, open source Foundry library.
But this is not our final model. Yeah, we will increase it.
Yeah. And in Mosaic it's 32 layers. Do you do Arabic? Unfortunately, no. Will we? again, go back to why we are doing this. I'm not, I mean, intellectually, you might have questions, but frankly, and there's nothing about whether Arabic is important or not, but it doesn't really fit into the mission and the reason why we're doing things, at least for now. Actually, maybe Jawi, I don't know. Arabic is Arabic, right? But as many of you, or some of you may know, actually the local variation or the Southeast Asian variation of Arabic is Jawi, right? Yeah. Since sustainability is important, how is CE team see this as a trend? I think it's a very important trend. So sustainability is one part of ESG. I've already said that we are emphasizing a lot, or rather, we do think that having these models accessible is important for accessibility, which to me is also part of sustainability over the long term. But to be very direct, right? We have a lot of incentive to figure out how to find GPUs that are very efficient, because ultimately they cost less. So things like, can we find the data center in the right place, or new technologies, immersion technology? These are all things that make it more accessible. And to us, practically, that means lower price and lower carbon footprint.
What's the value to Singapore by funding this CLLM when there's already existing LLM open source ones?
Again, if there is no value in this, we will find out very fast because nobody will use it, and then we will shut it down, right? But as far as we know, actually there's a line of people waiting to use these models.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental problem. The data is just not there, right? So we think that what we do here will close that gap, hopefully.
Yeah. So two things. One is, and maybe just to repeat, right? What our commercial partners are telling us is, one is we don't have time to go and do the data curation, right? And secondly, we also don't have time to do metrics and evaluate and maybe some sense of alignment. And secondly, if we are doing it from scratch, right, it takes a lot of GPUs. And third, the solution that we want to come up with, we want to own, right, which we can't get from other, not all the models are like that. Is AI Singapore also creating image and video generation models using Southeast Asian dataset? It's a good question. I guess we want to walk before we can run. But to be honest, at least when we were thinking about it, I do think there are some regional nuances about video and images. But to be honest, I'm also not so sure if there is a big gap, right? I'm not so sure. Yeah.
Maybe video there is.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. We don't know because text is easier, it's clearer. Video, not.
Image definitely a bit universal. Yeah.
Yeah. I might say okay, better represent multi-ethnic, blah blah blah. But actually that one I don't have to be in Singapore to say. So we don't know. It's not so clear cut. Then and then it's a question of. If you don't have a gap that you're filling, then you're definitely competing with the big guys, right? And why, okay, you can do it, but is that what you want to do? Yeah. Has the project come to an end, or is this a start? It's just a start. It's the beginning.
Yeah, definitely.
What kind of impact do you foresee this will have on the authenticity of mother tongue language learning in Singapore? Will this render it arbitrary? Not really. I want to, yeah, we hope whatever we do makes it easier for people to, kind of, things to be accessible, including learning the mother tongue, right? I guess must be a Singaporean who asked this question, because we all sometimes wish we had do away with mother tongue. But I think it maybe there's a more philosophical question, but it relates to questions about will it replace people, will it replace jobs? And my view, at least in our team, we love the technology. We think the technology should augment what is good, not kind of and do away with the boring stuff. But we're not trying to replace humans. Okay, how can the rest of like I said, we're open. People can come and sign up, find out more. We have collaboration, and we welcome more collaboration. And there will be more announced in as we launch this. What else roles are needed except AI engineers and scientists in the industry to do this? I guess there are two, right? One is, I would say that first of all, our engineers and scientists are hopefully balanced, not just narrow. They come from different backgrounds. They may not have a first degree in comp-sci. The other thing is that we also have people who think about product, right? People who think about communication, right? These are all important things. People who know how to manage a project. These are all important things. I don't know anything else you want to add?
As Leslie mentioned earlier, we do have, I think probably 40% of our team members are linguists, right?
Yes, that's also important to know. Maybe I have until 3:50, right? I should probably stop. Yeah. So maybe we take one last question, which is the top. They're all ones, but as you say, it's not just about language, but about culture. If everyone speaks English, they will also start thinking, okay, that wasn't a question. There are always hallucinations in LLM. What do you think about the role of knowledge graph theory? So grounding is important, right? And knowledge graphs help us to ground, and it will be a technique to reduce hallucination. So it's the context window, right? I can try to say, okay, I have a very big context window, anything you answer has to be from the context window, blah, blah, blah. These are different techniques, but maybe generally again, these are powerful tools, but they are flawed tools. And when we are thinking about product design, especially in production environments, we always have to understand that, right? And I always get very upset when people say, I need it 100% accuracy. I'm like, it'll never happen. It will never happen, right? But I can make it 90% accurate, and with good product design, actually be very, very useful. In fact, I would be very worried when we design things to be 99% or 98%, but when the 1% happens, the whole system breaks down, right? So I'd rather, we design things, we know it's 90%, but I design it so 90%, so what? I have a way around the fact that it will fail. Because unfortunately, I think for a long time, we will suffer from hallucinations. We will suffer from catastrophic kind of unexpected behaviors, just the nature of the technology. Right, with that, thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Leslie and William, for addressing the questions and for your insightful sharing. Thank you.